Stole my Bible. I switched it on him. So to be fair, that wasn't entirely his fault. Hey fam, welcome. Thank you for being with us tonight. I think for me, this time of year is so awesome and yet so frustrating at the same time, because I feel like every time I want to do something, we've got plans like already made. In fact, I was looking at our calendar the other night, and it was a depressing moment for me because my wife and I, we share a calendar on our phones, through the cloud somehow. I don't really understand it fully. It's real. It's real. And on and on the iCal on my phone and the iCalendar, that's what it used to be called. It might still be called that. Someone please confirm this for me. No, it was the house music. That's what I was trying to communicate. A little black dot appears on the days you have something, and it's kind of the pirate spot to me, because I know that there's something happening, and there's a dot what seems like every single day for the next month and a half, and it's full of dread. Well, we started, yeah, there you go, letting you into my life a little bit. We started this series of waiting as a culture, but not just a culture around the world. We call it Advent, right? And if you didn't know, that means waiting. It started December 1st, which I believe was yesterday. Was that yesterday? Yeah. It was. Look at that. Josiah's on it. You know what's funny though, because whenever I say or think of Advent, my head immediately goes to that calendar where you pull the chocolate out of it. And I think it's such a beautiful idea, but at the same time, it's so not enough. It's just not enough.
Not enough chocolate. Come on, Pastor.
That's it. Actually, you guys, I'm really depressed. I can't have chocolate anymore.
What?
Dairy.
Dairy?
I've got issues, guys. We're just getting real up in here tonight. All right, so Natalie and I, we're pregnant with babies 4 and 5. You guys know this, and we're in the middle of it, kind of the middle of it. I think yesterday made like 23, 24 weeks, something like that. So kind of the middle of it, and it feels like 3.5 months, 4 months is an eternity, and yet it's tomorrow at the same time. Anyone else have this kind of experience where you're like, there's this date, and I know it's looming, right? So people getting married up in here, right? Like graduation, wedding date, retirement, I don't know what it is, but there's that date and it's looming, and you're like, it is almost here, and yet it's so far away. And that's what we're thinking about. That's what we're celebrating in this season as we talk about Advent. Anytime someone mentions that yummy chocolate calendar, really what it's trying to get at is that for generations we had been waiting for this one thing that seems so far and yet so imminent at the same time, and now we're on the other side of it, and we're remembering what it was like to wait for that thing and that hope, have it be so far away and yet so imminent, and we're on the other side saying, yes, it's happened. It has happened, and we're counting down the days to celebrate that thing. And what's awesome to me is that where we find ourselves in the Gospel of John has nothing to do with Advent and yet everything at the same time. And it really hit me as I was driving here tonight, which I need to just stop praying in my car on the way to church because Jesus always reveals something new, and I'm like, but my sermon was so good, and he's like, yeah, but this, and I'm like, yeah, but, okay. It really, really hit me as I was cruising in the car that my timing of things is really screwed up. It's messed up. It's a little broken. I think something's right, and it's not. I try and walk forward in something, and Jesus is like, bring it back in. That's not it. So with that, waiting and timing, what we're talking about tonight, chapter 7 of the Gospel of John says this. After this, Jesus traveled in Galilee, since he did not want to travel in Judea because the Jews were trying to kill him. Why were they trying to kill him? Why would the Jews try and kill him? I don't know if you know this, but at this time, Roman occupancy in the Holy Land meant that they weren't allowed to carry out their traditional ways of punishment, i.e. stoning. It wasn't something that they were technically allowed to do. Everything had to be handled by the Roman officials, and yet Jesus is so freaked out. Not freaked out, that's not the right word. Jesus knows that they're trying to kill him, and so he's not going to Judea. They're so pissed at Jesus over something. Now, what could get a bunch of religious people that angry? You attack their God. Okay, but it's not just any attack on their God. It was Jesus literally saying, I am equal with the Father. I am God, is what he was saying. That's why they were so riled up. So he says, because the Jews were trying to kill him. The Jewish festival of shelters was near. Anyone celebrate that this year? No? All right, we'll get there in a second. You really should. It's like, all right, I'll tell you in a second. Shelters was near. So his brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea so your disciples can see your works that you are doing. For no one does anything in secret while he's seeking public recognition. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For not even his brothers believed him. Jesus told them, my time has not yet arrived, but your time is always at hand. The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me because I testify about it, that its works are evil. Go up to the festival yourselves. I'm not going to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. After he said these things, he stayed in Galilee. Jesus, as we unpack this, I pray that we would have fresh eyes to hear and see what is going on, that we would understand and that it would change how we view this time, but how we view all time. You're good. It's in your name we pray, amen. All right, so what you may not know is the Festival of Shelters was the last of the 3 Jewish festivals that God commanded Israel to go back to Jerusalem for, right? Said, you're going to celebrate, this is like Deuteronomy 19, I think it is, where he commanded, you're going to go to the place I specify, because this is before the temple was built, and you're going to go celebrate there. And it's a week-long festival where they camp and party. Like they have a ruckus time celebrating what God has done. And the thing that they're celebrating was actually God bringing them out of captivity in Egypt. And so some people call it Festival of Shelters. Other people, the Festival of Booth, Feast of Booths, your translation might say. And literally what it was after they left Egypt for a week, they stayed in a spot and were in these makeshift huts, booths, tents, whatever you want to call it, and they worshiped God and said thank you and celebrated and had great food and wine and great company. And so that's the Festival of Booths or Festival of Shelters, whatever you want to call it. And so that took place September 23rd through 30th this year, in case you were wondering. It's not that same time next year, but I vote we celebrate it in our own way. Eric's about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Boom, we're in. Eric and I are celebrating Feast of Booths next year. You're welcome to join us if you bring a little bit more pep. So this thing is happening, and what I never made the connection about with this passage until I was cruising over here was that Jesus is saying, listen, I'm not celebrating that thing yet, because that thing is all about your house being built somewhere, and my house hasn't been built yet. Jesus refused to go there because he knew his time was not happening yet. And that time that he's talking about was the fulfillment of the promise of the prediction, the hope of the Savior. And Jesus is like, I haven't completed the mission yet. Let me give you some more context on this. Because other places, they call it the Feast of the Tabernacle. And after Solomon, the third king of Israel, right before the kingdom divided and became two separate nations that were one nation, and it got really messy and convoluted because Solomon wasn't a great dad and had over 1,000 wives, and so there's a whole mess there that we don't have time to get into. But after he built the temple, which took a long time, right? 40 years. They had a celebration. And you know when that celebration happened? That wasn't rhetorical. You could probably guess.
Now? This time?
Well, not this time, but this time, right? Where we're at. Chapter 7, the Feast of Booths, right? It happened at that time that they celebrated the temple being opened. And the temple was all about what? The presence of God. It was all about the presence of God. Before that, the Israelites literally carried a giant tent around from place to place to place to place as God instructed them. 40 years wandering the wilderness, and then it was a makeshift right before it moved into Jerusalem, and then the ark came and all of this. A lot more historical context than you need. Suffice it to say that the temple was all about God's presence. That you could literally point to the place and say God's presence is right there through that curtain, looking into the Holy of Holies. There's a 6-inch curtain that used to separate it, right? Like from the holy place, which is the outer area, to the Holy of Holies where the ark was and where God's presence literally dwelt. And the high priest once a year was allowed to go into that place. But it was such an intense thing that when the high priest went in, they would tie a rope around his waist. Because if he hadn't repented of his sins, if he hadn't given everything back to God and said, hey, I'm stripped bare, all of my dirty laundry is out for you to see. If he hadn't done that, when he entered the Holy of Holies, he would drop dead. And they'd put a little bell on him. And every once in a while, he'd have to ring it so that they knew, this dude's still alive. Otherwise, the rope comes in and they'd have to pull him out. And so the Jewish people, Jesus' brothers, are literally celebrating God's presence and God's deliverance in the Feast of Booths. And they're so missing the point. Anyone have brothers up in here? What? Brothers? Yeah? A few of us? One. There you go. I'm blessed with 3 brothers. Oof. That's hard. And I can tell you that when my brothers and I bicker, we jab. And then some of us, we swing with the hatchet instead, right? So Jesus is having this discourse with his brothers, and they're saying, hey Jesus, why don't you go down and all of the works that you're doing to try and gain public recognition, all the things you're doing to try and amass a following, why don't you go do that? Because right now you're in secret. You're up here in Galilee where no one is. Why don't you go down to Jerusalem if you're really who you say you are, right? And let me tell you this. Anytime my brothers have approached me with something similar, although not at all similar because I'm not God and there's a whole mess there, you can just sense the spite, and you can sense it's like when your brother comes up to you and is like, oh, that's a nice shirt. BS, you don't mean that.
Okay, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with it? So when I was in high school, I hope my brother doesn't listen to this sermon. When I was in high school, he was a different person back then, okay? When I was in high school, I got this shirt, and it was my favorite shirt. The shirt I'm wearing. Yeah, I've had it since high school. There'd be a tent on me back then. I was like a third of the person I am now, size-wise. No, so I had this shirt, and it was like a light blue shirt with a green bird on it, right? And back then, like, everything was cooler if you slap a bird on it. And it had a bird on it. I loved this shirt, and it got destroyed because I wore it every other day. Because you can't wear it every day, every other day. Finally, I found the same shirt, and I was so excited. I was like, I found it again. And I had it in a bag, and I put the bag on my bed, and then I left the house, and I came back to the house, and my shirt was gone. I'm like, what is going on? 20 minutes later, I see my brother wearing my bird shirt. My brand new bird shirt, and I was livid, right? But that's the kind of relationship that brothers have. It didn't come to blows, thankfully, because, I'm holier than that.
At least you thought you were.
Yep. Leave here and go to Judea so your disciples can see your works. Jesus told them, my time has not yet arrived, but your time is always at hand. Okay, Jesus had a personality. Can we just talk about that for a second? This is him giving it all back to his brothers. Your time is always at hand. The world cannot hate you. Later on in John 17, he's praying over his disciples, and he says, I pray that you would be in the world, but not of the world. That the world would know you because you kind of look like them, but at the same time that you wouldn't look like them at all. And he's talking to his brothers now, and he's saying, listen, the world's not going to hate you because you guys are it. You guys are the world. The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me because I testify about it, that its works are evil. Go up to the festival yourselves. I'm not going to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. You guys catch that? There's three big things he's saying here. First of all, he says, my time has not yet come. And this is where I want to talk about timing, because in this moment in history, the savior that everyone is looking for is political. Everyone is looking for a political savior. They're under tyrannical Roman rule. They cannot fully worship and fulfill what they see as the law because the Romans have their own laws and say, like, you can't stone people in public. You've got to go through courts to do that. There has to be a judge that sentences that. Right? So there were things that were stopping them, but also there was massive oppression, there was overtaxation, a lot of things happening in this season of Israel's history. And Jesus is like, listen, my time has not yet come. And everyone has been wondering, then when? For 400 years, God did not speak into the world. From the book of Malachi to the book of Matthew, it's about 400 years where God is not actively speaking into the world, right? Hebrews 1 says many times, many ways, God spoke to us through the prophets. So there was no prophets from that time to Jesus's arrival, just before Jesus's arrival. And Jesus says, my time hasn't come yet. There's such an element of patience that Jesus is asking for. Not even that Jesus is walking in. Can you imagine? He's now like 32-ish years old. He is-ish, yeah. John doesn't give a great timeline, and I have it in my other notes that Jesus said don't use. So he's 32-ish years old at this point in his ministry. He has been waiting because he knew when he was 8. If you'll remember, he was walking back from the temple, and his parents kept going, and he's like, no, I got to go back to my father's house, and I've got to teach the rabbis what's going on, right? And so his parents are on the road, they're walking, and all of a sudden they're like, where's Jesus? And they go back to the temple and find him teaching the teachers as an 8-year-old. Well, actually, that doesn't seem so extreme because Hillel teaches me all the time. But it is at the same time, right? Like, he knew from that time, he's like, where else would I be except my Father's house? Like, come on, Mom and Dad. Straighten up and fly right. He knew from that time what was going to happen. My time has not yet come. Second thing he calls out. He says this, the world cannot hate you, but it does hate me because I testify about it. The world cannot hate you. It's funny, I think we like to throw out this big idea of like the world and then the church, and Jesus's vision for it was not that they would be like completely distinct, but that the church would so influence and love the people of the world that it was sometimes indistinguishable until all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, the love that is here is so much more profound than anywhere else. And yet we still like to fully separate ourselves. Jesus is telling them, listen, you look just like everyone else. And he's saying this to religious men. Hear that. He's saying this to religious men. You look just like everyone else. Everyone else, like Gentiles included, like the people who eat bacon included. Like this was a big deal. Like, yo, Jesus is taking off the gloves. He's throwing hard punches right now. You look just like everyone else, and the world can't hate you. Everyone else can't hate you because you look just like them. And if they're going to hate you, they're hating themselves, right? Like, it doesn't work. Church, in this season, especially the season of Advent, as we're waiting on this birth of Jesus, celebrating the most spectacular miracle ever, that God took on flesh to step into the world and love us, like that's insane. But if we look just like everyone else, what are we doing? The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me. Here's the second part, because I testify about it that its works are evil. Last week, we talked about being offensive, right? And essentially what we summed up was that Jesus was super offensive in his message, but as a person, he was not. And there's a big difference for us, church, that yes, the fact that I say you're not good enough is going to offend people, and that's okay. But as a person, I pray that I don't offend anyone. That instead I'm standing with arms wide open saying, yeah, just as broken as you are, that's how broken I am, and I love you, right? And Jesus right here is throwing down saying the world is going to hate me because of my message. Because I'm calling out the evil things. I'm calling out the broken things. I'm calling out the destructive things, both inside the religion and outside. Last important thing I want to talk about right here is this. Jesus tells them, I'm not going up to the festival because my time has not yet fully come. After he had said these things, he stayed in Galilee. The next verse throws down like this. After his brothers had gone up to the festival, then he also went up, not openly, but secretly. The Jews were looking for him at the festival and saying, where is he? And there was a lot of murmuring about him among the crowds. Some were saying he's a good man. Others were saying, no, on the contrary, he's deceiving the people. Still, nobody was talking publicly about him for fear of the Jews. After Jesus said, no, I'm not going to this festival. My time hasn't yet come. He turns around and goes to the festival. And I think this is profound for me. This isn't something that really makes sense in my heart. No. Let me rephrase that. It's not something that really makes sense in my head, but it's something that is really making sense in my heart. The fact that Jesus said, I'm not doing this because my time hasn't come. And yet, at the festival where they're celebrating redemption, when they're celebrating being rescued, and they're celebrating God's presence, he can't stay away. Jesus can't stay away from that. Because if they're going to celebrate that, they've got to know who they should really be celebrating. If they're going to celebrate rescue and they're going to celebrate God's presence in the world, then he cannot be missing. Because the person that they really should be celebrating is not the tabernacle, it's not the booths outside of Egypt, it's Jesus. Because first of all, he's made a place, a permanent place for us. He said, listen, you don't belong anywhere right now. In fact, Peter calls us transients, he calls us exiles, he calls us homeless, because our home is not here on the earth, it's with Jesus. So he's made a permanent place for us. And if we're going to celebrate a permanent home, it's got to be Jesus. And then they're celebrating rescue. They're celebrating a temporary rescue from captivity. And they were about to walk back into it. Because after they left Egypt, they wandered around the desert for 40 years, and then they spent a whole bunch of judges and 3 kings worth of time establishing a kingdom. The kingdom was then divided, and then they spent about 7 kings for the northern kingdom and like 4 for the southern kingdom, if my timeline's right, before all of a sudden the northern kingdom was taken into captivity again. And then the southern kingdom, guess what? They got taken into captivity as well, and they faced exile, and then they had to come back and rebuild the walls and rebuild the temple, and then all of a sudden now they're in captivity again. And so as they're celebrating rescue from captivity, Jesus is saying, listen, this is all temporary. This is all temporary. I'm the one who provides real rescue. I'm the one who provides real hope. You guys are celebrating this temporary thing of being released from Egypt, about to walk into something else because you're not getting the true message. And he can't stay away. And he can't stay away. And he never could stay away, which is why from the very beginning it was always his intention to come. It was always his intention. I once heard an Easter sermon preached where the pastor said that God had to change his plan and send Jesus because the law didn't work, and it's not so. It's not so. Jesus decided from the very beginning, before creating, he said, I am coming after my people. And so, as we celebrate Jesus coming after his people in Christmas, we're celebrating Jesus coming after his people right here in John chapter 7. And guess what? It's going to happen again and again and again. He's going to come after his people to the point of dying in our place for our sin and for our freedom. And every time I try and push Jesus away in my life, he keeps coming after me. And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to that festival. My time hasn't fully come. Just a few days later, he's like, no, I can't stay away. I can't stay away. If we're going to celebrate freedom and we're going to celebrate rescue and we're going to celebrate presence, then I've got to be there. Because right then, his brothers, his people, and the world were celebrating rescue and they were celebrating presence, but they were celebrating the wrong rescue and they were celebrating the wrong presence. And here's where I want to close us for tonight. Jesus was so profoundly in love with us, so profoundly passionate for us, that he waited. Because let me tell you, if I was Jesus, and it's a good thing that I'm not Jesus, right, for so many reasons, but if I was Jesus, like, I'm eager beaver. I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'm right now, put me in, coach. Like, but no, he says, not yet. I'm okay with that. God, right, not yet. You can change your mind, right? Not yet. Okay, I'm okay with that. And I picture back in the garden when Adam and Eve are like eating the fruit and Jesus is like, now, do it right now, God. Right now. Send me now. Not yet. Okay, they get the law, and as Moses is coming down from the mountain with these tablets and the 10 Commandments are on it, and he sees Israel worshiping a golden calf, and he's like, what the heck? God just released us from Egypt, and Jesus is like, now, send me now. No, not yet. Think about like Nehemiah coming back from exile, right? And he comes and he sees his city in ruins and his heart is broken. Jesus looking down, now, not yet. He was so anxious and excited for this time. And I think that's the beautiful thing that we miss out on, is that he loved us so much. Not just that he came, but that he waited. And for some of you, he's been waiting for years. Not yet. No, you're going to find rescue. And you're going to find presence. Not yet. I can wait. Because he's patient. I think in the season of waiting, what we're really waiting for is the rescuer. And I would hope that some of us would open our eyes to what Jesus is doing, that we would open our eyes. Like, we've been searching for something, for relationship for so long. We've been searching for it in so many other people other than Jesus. And we've been searching for freedom for so long, and we're finding it in other things other than him. Let me tell you, in my family alone, my extended family, we've got 6 alcoholics, 3 of which are no longer alive. And I'm just talking about aunts, uncles, right? Like close, immediate family. We've got 12 at least people who are addicted to pornography or coming off addiction to pornography. We've got people who are addicted to narcotics. And I'm just talking about my family. Right? We search for freedom in all of these other things, and ultimately what you discover when you talk to anyone who's addicted to anything, whether that be social media or the hardest of drugs, what they're really chasing is release. What they're chasing is freedom from something. And we pursue it in so many other ways, and Jesus is like, yo, I'm right here. I am right here. I've always been here. I will always be here because I am the rescuer and I am the presence that you need. Let's dig into that. Let's dig into that. Because ultimately, that veil, that 6-inch thick veil that separated God's presence from the rest of us schlubs, when Jesus died, it was torn in two from top to bottom. God was like, yo, I no longer dwell just right here. I am everywhere. He always was, but it was symbolic, right? He tore that symbolically, saying, I'm going to dwell everywhere. And not just everywhere, I'm going to dwell in my people. And if you're here tonight, and maybe you've known Jesus for a long time, or you think you've known Jesus for a long time, right? Like maybe that's you. Like maybe tonight it's time for you to get real with God and say, Jesus, do I really have your freedom? And do I really have your rescue? And do I really have your presence? And maybe some of us here tonight have been running for years and God's been chasing. I'll never forget when one of the first times I was playing soccer. I was really fast in high school. I'm not fast anymore, but I was really fast in high school. And one of the first times I was actually playing soccer, I got the ball and I was running and I was all alone, right? And all of a sudden, like I look over my left shoulder and I see a guy pursuing me and I'm like, oh shoot, right? Maybe that's you. Maybe you're running and you feel like you've got the ball and all of a sudden you see Jesus in the rear view and you're like, oh no, he's in hot pursuit, but I want my own way. If you're wondering, I tripped on the ball and fell flat on my face. And I hope you don't have to, right? Like I hope if Jesus is chasing you, maybe you just stop. Maybe you stop running. Maybe tonight's your night to do that. Maybe you should stop being like Jesus' brothers. Maybe tonight, that's your opportunity to say, okay, Jesus, I'm done running. I'm done trying to do it on my own. I'm done trying to find freedom in other things. It's you. It's you. It's only you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to worship. What song is first? Resurrecting. You guys, the resurrected King is resurrecting me. Yo, I don't know. That's freedom. That's rescue. That's presence right there. And we believe that worship is always a response to what Jesus has done. And so tonight is our chance to no holds bar respond to what Jesus has done. And if that means you need to lay flat on your face and say, I'm sorry, Jesus, that's what you need to do. If you need to sit in your own discomfort for a few minutes, that's what you need to do. If you need to come talk to someone, I'll be in the back, other people will be in the back, and you need prayer, that's what you need to do tonight. But whatever it is, we are going to respond to what Jesus has done and what Jesus is going to do as we sing that the resurrected King is resurrecting us. Jesus, you are good, and I thank you that you couldn't stay away, that the timing was so perfect that you couldn't wait any longer. Because in a celebration all about rescue and all about presence, you had to tell us that we were missing the point. Because it's all about you. Jesus, it's all about you. It's always been about you. It has always been about you. And Jesus, it will always be about you. So tonight we give you everything. We hold nothing back because you held nothing back from us. And in the same way that death couldn't hold you back and you wouldn't stay dead, you've promised us that death can't hold us back. And you've given us new life in you. Jesus, we love you. It's in your name we pray.